All right, if you've gone through my channel at all, you probably notice a high number of Malazan books. I have once done a read-along on my first time through Malazan, kind of as a deep dive, pointing out some things that I am learning along the way, and then asking questions. And I had new readers that were reading along with me. I had seasoned readers coming along, answering, giving their opinions. And I really want to do the same thing, at least for this first book, maybe for the first 3 or even the second trilogy as well. But I read this earlier this year, and even though it did impact me, it was a little bit of a surface read just for the plot and things. And the more I've thought about it, the more intentional it has been clear that Donaldson is. Like, going into the second book, I've only read the first portions of it, and I decided to go back here to really do a second read, a very intentional read. I've already broken out my highlighter and pen. And so consider this an invitation to new readers of this series, or Donaldson, or whatever, and seasoned readers. I'm going to go through this first book again and do the same sort of discussion videos. I don't know in totally what respect it'll be. Last time it was mostly a video for a chapter or a few chapters, but sometimes a side sort of thing talking about a concept within the series, or just whatever. And I want to do the same thing here. I won't talk about major plot spoilers of this book, other than I'm hoping to maybe draw people's eye a little bit, because there are definitely little road signs along the way of things. Even as I've reread this first chapter that I'll get into here, there have been little things that I wish I would have paid even extra attention to see the type of story and the type of intention that I think Stephen Donaldson is putting into this great book. I think it's a masterpiece. The more I think about it and the more distant away I get from it, the more it just kind of sinks itself into me. And so even if you haven't read it, maybe consider this first chapter as a bit of an introduction to certainly this main character, Thomas Covenant, who takes really center stage, obviously, but is quite the character. A lot of people just bounce from the series because of Covenant, but the other people who really obsess about this series and really seem to find it just so compelling, it also is because of Thomas Covenant, because he is not a character who is overall revered for all the great he is doing. He has this very self-centered way about him, bitter. He obviously he's the center of his world, but we'll see maybe sort of how that got put into him, and how seeing that is really his viewpoint to the extreme, how that will affect both him as we go along, the things that make him tick, the things that make him just very angry, and what he does about that, and how it affects the people around him, which is another amazing thing about this book. It's not that we're getting this great heroic journey necessarily. In a lot of ways, it is a cautionary tale, and I think it has a lot of merit. I think it's very human, even though he will represent some of the worst impulses that people have. Like, he will do things that I don't think most of us would even consider doing at all. But I have questions both about, Stephen Donaldson's, his usage of these things that he'll have him do, have Thomas Covenant doing, which I question a little bit, but also there is something to it maybe. Again, let's just get right into it. And I do have questions to the people who have read it, and maybe if they even haven't read it, with some of these passages, I'll ask you some questions that I'm trying to figure out on my second time through, especially. So it starts like this. It has the chapter named Golden Boy, which is kind of funny, and it will go back. There will be this song that will, a verse of a song that will come up, and it sounds like it's going to start as this actual golden boy, but he is introduced as a total pariah. The very first, and I don't want to read a lot of passages, but I want to read this first one. So right after it says one golden boy, it says this. She came out of the store just in time to see her young son playing on the sidewalk directly in the path of the gray, gaunt man who strode down the center of the walk like a mechanical derelict. For an instant, her heart quailed. Then she jumped forward, gripped her son by the arm, snatched him out of harm's way. She does what everyone is going to do when they see him, and she just represents what the whole town. I think there's about 5,000 in his town, so it's a small town. She says, "Go away. You ought to be ashamed." And so I will just mention this. So he has leprosy, and that will be revealed later in this chapter, exactly what his infirmity is. But of all the things to get, he has leprosy, and this is like a biblical type of infirmity. It seemed like it was the worst of the worst, the deadened skin. I used to actually have a fear of leprosy. When I was like 5 years old, I heard some stories about lepers and things, and I thought I was going to get leprosy. So anyway, but she's saying you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And why is that? Is because he's out and about when they wish he would just stay home at the very least. Stay home and die so that other people won't contract this. Within the chapter, we have, he's going to lose his wife, or it's going to be mentioned that he has already lost his wife, his beloved wife, who he still seems to adore, and his son. There will be people who he knew very well. He even knew their handshakes, it mentions, and they just want nothing to do with him. A reason why the wife certainly left is because they just, things were getting good in their life, and I think with leprosy, it's often contracted when you're a child, so she wasn't going to risk it. So she's moved all the way out of state. But let's keep going. So it says that Thomas Covenant's stride went on, and you will see this singular focus in Thomas Covenant to the point where it's very self-centered. It seems like in a lot of ways. Everything about what he does is about self-preservation. And so his stride went on, despite the fact that the town does not want him a part of things. So he goes to the doctor at one point, and he has this, he remembers what the doctor said. VSE, and that will come up a lot of times. That's an acronym. So VSE, Mr. Covenant, visual surveillance of extremities. Your health depends upon it. Those dead nerves will never grow back. You'll never know when you've hurt yourself unless you get in the habit of checking. Do it all the time. Think about it all the time, and he will. The next time, you might not be so lucky. VSE, those initials comprised his entire life. And I wish I would have focused on that or clued in on that as even more of a theme, certainly within this first book, how everything has to do with this self-preservation. But it's going to have this massive effect on the guy. So he used to be a bestseller, and even the people who used to revere him. He wrote this great book, and it mentions it in this first chapter, that he just was he didn't even know, especially, that he was going to become a bestseller. He didn't expect it. His wife, he lived on his wife's meager earnings, but she wasn't a big person, but she handled these horses with this great ease. It's almost like she seduced them, Thomas said. And some of the ways that he talks about his wife, it seems a little shallow. He speaks about her great beauty and her eyes and her skin tone and certain parts and things, and so he has this desire within him that she has left. He is now impotent, and so he has this desire within him that I don't know what it was like before, but it has certainly cropped up now that he has this leprosy. And anyway, she was the breadwinner for a time, and when he became the breadwinner, he finally got his big break. And it talks about this almost sustained lightning bolt of creativity for 5 months, and then he sent off the manuscript, and within a year or whatever, he finally got that letter. That's when she kind of shifted towards, she decided right then that it was time to have a child, and it was time for him to become, the breadwinner in the family. And they finally felt that they had made some money. He had some notoriety, so whatever his next book was going to be would be another bestseller, likely. A lot of people were reading and talking about his book and everything, but now he was known as a pariah. His life has just gone to crap. And so in that way, you can see some of the initial stages for where this bitterness and stuff comes from. But again, you wonder, like, he goes to them a few times in the extreme. So where's he going? His stride is not wavering. He is going 2 miles from his place to pay a phone bill. A phone bill which you could pay via letter, and he has paid it via letter before, but they sent it back to him saying, hey, we've gotten it. Members in the community have taken care of it, so just stay home. And that's the message that pisses him off. Stay home. And he doesn't want to do that. He wants to be intentional with his own life. He wants to have control over his own life. What little control he does have, since everything has been taken away from him through this leprosy. And now he has to just focus on his own survival and what very little he can reclaim of his life. So let's skip a little bit. Let's see. I mentioned Joan. It talks about him more, or her more. He has a couple lapses in attention. Remember, the doctor said to be very, very focused on his self-preservation. He goes to this grocery store, or he's walking past the grocery store, and, even the grocery store has sometimes just delivered some supplies over to him and delivered some things, whether he ordered them or not, and that frustrates him as well. The divorce, it just happened. It was automatic. No compassion involved with it, and he says the divorce had been granted because no compassionate law could force a woman to raise her child in the company of a man like him. It's interesting. The format of this book is a third person, so it's not him saying it. And you could see how if it was him first person, that would really affect some of the narration. But even then, I wonder if this passage passage that I said is very much, it is him, it's in his internal dialogue in some ways, right? Some of his internal bitterness coming out. And it's interesting because some of the stuff that will happen later in the book he'll do, but he doesn't really feel shame about it. And it doesn't even necessarily mention sometimes that he should feel shame about it. So it's interesting to see that play in the narration, and you wonder how you kind of separate that from Donaldson, how he's... I hope that makes sense. So if you have a comment on that, if you've read it, let me know, because that's one of the things. So in this town of 500 or 5,000, he crosses in front of a department store, and this is the first little clue of something, of some of his internal stuff going on. Remember, he's impotent. He loved his wife. He found her still very beautiful. He thinks about her every so often, and he's distracted as he looks into this department store. And I can see why some people would just bounce from the book right here even. But he notices these high school girls, and for the way they're looking, and leaning over, looking at some jewelry in what he's considering a provocative way. And it's making his throat tighten. And he even says he found himself resenting the hips and breasts of the girls, curves for other men's caresses, but not for him. Which, like, these are minors, is what I'm gleaning from that. So even then we're seeing that he has, whether he had this issue before, he's certainly, since becoming impotent, like, no one's off the table, it seems like, in his imagination at the very least, which this is our main character that we have to go with for, all these books are the books of the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. So if that already seems like too much to handle, I wouldn't fault anyone for bouncing, but I will say I think there's something amazing going on as this cautionary tale, or whatever it is, whatever this story, the intent of this story is, it is something amazing. And anyway, we have him having these issues, and he can't even, he's impotent, and he can't even release that, the release of lust is what he said. Even that was denied to him. So gross. Anyway, and it mentions he still desires his wife and things. So bracing his shoulders like a stranger, he suppressed the memory of his wife. And, it's in his best interest to not even think about any of that stuff. And, that's what the narrator's saying. Such thoughts were a weakness he could not afford. He had to stamp them out. Better to be bitter. Bitterness survives it. And again, sorry, he was bitter about these girls and the people who get to be with them, and bitter, and then he kind of has this, his wife pops into his head, and, a longing for that. And again, he's just going to push that down as soon as it shows up. Bitterness survives. It seemed to be the only savor he was still able to taste. He was standing in the middle of the street, like he stopped walking, his fist clenched, and then he bumps into someone, or someone bumps into... as he kept going forward again, he bumps into someone. So a lapse of judgment, and immediately, or a lapse of being focused on his self-preservation, immediately bumps into someone. Again, it talks about him wanting to pay his bill, and he wanted to do it in person. So I wonder to you, what paying the bill in person, refusing to leave his house would, it's kind of bringing him up as a sympathetic character in that way, other than the creepy sort of thing with looking at these girls. But what does that, what is he representing in this first chapter as he's moving forward? And then we get to the Golden Boy. He hears this verse, or he hears this tune running in his mind, and it has this little verse. Golden Boy with feet of clay, let me help you on your way. Is this an actual song? I might just be an idiot, and maybe this is a song from the 70s or whatever. Golden boy with feet of clay, let me help you on your way. A proper push will take you far, but what a clumsy lad you are. He can't afford to be clumsy. So I wonder what you take out of that. So anyway, within this verse, as he's thinking about it, it's kind of accompanied by this low stripper music. So again, he's got this sexual thing on his mind, and he wonders if there's an overweight goddess somewhere in the mystical heavens of the universe grinding out his burlesque fate. A proper push leer will take you far, but what a clumsy lad you are. Mock pained dismay. Oh, right, golden boy. Terrible. So after that, it shows more of the things he lost. He lost his marriage, his son. He wrote a novel, but he had never written another one because he just had this amazing, almost lightning bolt of energy for the 5 months that he took to write it. Let me see if there's anything else really worth. But it wasn't an easy time. So I think a lot of people, newlyweds, it's not an easy time, certainly for money, usually. And as he was writing this, there was an anguish in the perception of heights and abysses that gave each word he wrote the shape of dried black blood. I wonder what you take of that. And he was not a man who liked heights, unrestricted emotion, who did not come easily to him, but it had been glorious. Like he seems like almost afraid of success and didn't really even want to consider that. But since it happened, it was great. But it kind of freaked him out a little bit. Man. I also wonder about Joan. So it talks a little bit. Maybe I'll finish it here as we talk about Joan, because it also finishes in the chapter somewhat about Joan. Even though, it says that she was a quiet woman. She clearly was beautiful to Thomas. Earned them a living breaking horses. Just had such a way with them, and I wonder if there's something intentional about that living, that Stephen Donaldson has given this wife of Thomas. And even then, there's also this thing where she could just ride bareback, and then just all the wildness of a horse just goes away. But when he gets on the horse, he never ever got rid of that fear of horses, which I think expresses some kind of, there's something. She seemed like the rock in the relationship while they were together, even though he wrote a bestseller, but she was able to grind out a living so that they could still eat, and this is expressed in the narration. And so now that she is gone, she is a loss to him in a number of ways. She's even out of the whole state. Terrible. While he is thinking about this is how the chapter ends. And really, we haven't had any inclination of any kind of fantasy element going on at all in this first chapter. But it ends like this. The next instant, a hand, as he's daydreaming, a hand plucked at his sleeve. Hey, mister. And this just freaks him out. Like, people always avoid him. But now this little boy of about 8 or 9 years old is holding on to his sleeve and not letting go. And this is actually putting Thomas off. Hey, mister, here, take it. And he had an old sheet of paper. He told me to give it to you. You're supposed to read it. Him, the boy pointed a shaking finger back up the sidewalk. And Covenant looks, and he sees an old man. He sees an old man in a dirty ochre robe standing half a block away. In one hand, and he's mumbling with his mouth hung open, and he's like looking up at the sun. Like he seems like a total crazy person. His face was lifted to the sky. He seemed to be staring directly at the sun. In his left hand, he held a wooden beggar's bowl. His right hand clutched a long wooden staff, to the top of which was affixed a sign bearing one word, beware. And in that moment, in that odd moment, I'll read this, the sign itself seemed to exert a peril over Covenant. He's deeply affected. Dangers crowded through it to get at him. Terrible dangers swam at the air towards him, screaming like vultures, and around them, looking toward him through the screams, there were eyes, 2 eyes like fangs. This is interesting because, anyway, I'll talk about it after. Sorry, 2 eyes like fangs, curious and deadly. These, not curious and deadly, curious and deadly. They regarded him with a fixed, cold, and hungry malice, focused on him as if he and he alone were the carrion they craved. Malevolence, dripped from them like venom. For that moment, he quavered in the grasp of an inexplicable fear. He feels like just the center of this, of some malevolent force focused on him. And, that's something I wonder, is that actually happening? Or is this just, is this something, even the land, remember, I guess this is a good place to finish off on a good topic to finish off on this. He is Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. And this land that he will be a part of, he will not necessarily believe that it is even happening. And so even here, I wonder if he's really seeing, if he's really feeling some force, magical force kind of put on him, or if this is just the natural sort of delusion, I guess not natural, but some sort of delusion put on him by this singular focus that is happening on him to be, self-preservation at all costs and everything else that has happened to him. And clearly he's a broken man. And so I wonder, both in this instance and in instances in the past, I've read the first book and I'm not totally sure, what is happening in his head, or if it's, if he's actually whisked away to some place, you know what I mean? And so that's the first instance here. So he sees the sign, beware, but it was only a sign. But what an impact it had on him. You're supposed to read it, the boy said again. Don't touch me, Covenant murmured to the grip on his arm. I'm a leper. And that's the first time I think he actually mentions leprosy. But when he looked around, the boy was gone. Seems to imply some kind of weird sort of fantasy thing going on, right? And so, also interesting, he's a writer. There will be some sort of, speaking about the naming in this and the types of creatures, very Tolkien-esque in some ways. And I wonder if the author is doing that to, as, kind of a shameless copy in some ways of Tolkien, but also as a writer who maybe was in, speaking of Thomas Covenant, if it is sort of part of his delusions, it could be implied that he's also influenced by Tolkien in his own novel that became a bestseller, and some of the stuff that comes up, maybe there is that cross thing happening because there is this element of some of it being in his head. I don't know. Even reading it for the first time, I don't know. And so I wonder what your opinions are if you have read this. Is there anything I've missed? So I'm hoping we can get through some of the next chapters a little bit quicker. And I think there are about 20 of them. So let me look. 25 chapters. So I won't read as many passages, but I do want to bring up some things, maybe do a couple chapters at a time or one chapter at a time, but a little bit smaller. And I wonder what you think. I wonder what you think. And are you going to join me or, read it this month or at least consider reading it in the next year? Let me know.